So to create our user interface, our application needs to import the Tkinter, Tkinter library. Where are we at anyways? V, alrighty. So the way I'm going to break this one up to make it easy to follow, at least I hope easy to follow, is I'm going to be putting this stuff into various functions and then calling them main and main2 and main3 and main4 so that we can update them as we go along. So with that in mind, I'm going to make a main, call to a main down here, and I'm going to define main up here. But all of these different ways of creating the user interface do need the Tkinter library, so we're going to do that. From Tkinter, from Tkinter, that's not a T, is it? There's that. There we go. Import asterisk. Now we could just do import Tkinter, but then every time we wanted to create a new button or whatever, we would have to prefix it with that name, right? And then there's one little oddball exception that seems to not come in unless called out specifically, and that's message box. So it's really dumb to have those two statements in a row, but trust me, if I don't do that, then half the people who try to get these things to run will not be able to get message box to work. So what is a message box? Well, it's just a window. It's just like one of those little, press OK to continue kind of things. So we're just going to make main call message box, and we'll probably comment it out. So message box. In Tkinter, a lot of the things you do involve creating an object and placing them on the screen, like making a new button, right? We could make a new button. I'm going to erase this immediately, right? You make a button like that and you do something with it. Should have been upper capitalized. Anyways, but a message box you just call with a function call. Message box dot show info, and then title, and then message. And so it popped up, right? Title and message. Obviously, you can fill in either one of those things there. Python quit. You can also do show warning or show error. So I could, oopsie. Right, so now, uh-oh, and then oh no. And apparently if we close this scene before closing this window out, it kills idle on my machine. I'm surprised to see that, but okay. And it's not closing this. It's behaving quite oddly. You're gonna crash when I do this? Badly as you did last time? Yep. I don't know what's going on with the message box there. Anyways, we're not correctly creating our applications here. I'm just throwing message box open before even drawing any other dialogue. So maybe it's not surprising it's not working too well, but I'm sure that those examples will work for you if you do them, especially on Windows. I've never seen it crash like that. That was pretty odd. So now to get down to the more interesting stuff, we're going to put some stuff on the screen, labels and input places and output places. And the first way we're going to do this is what's using .pack as our manager for placing things on the screen. Then there's also a grid interface where you can specify things by their position. And actually, I think I prefer that one, but we're gonna look at several different ways. In just a second, sorry. All right, so we're going to create our window. And you'll see different, I'm just going to comment all these out. You'll see different examples call a window different things, whether they could call it main or mainframe or win. Well, I'm awfully fond of the word win, right, for window. And so this is win is equal to frame, excuse me, TK with a capital T, lowercase k. In other words, we're creating a window with the user interface, the TK user interface. Now, when we run it, it's just going to pop up a window. We're not going to see anything else, right? There we go. And that one didn't actually crash. See, my thought was that I bet if I did that and then called one of these, it wouldn't have been so poorly behaved. That's my guess. I'm going to try it out. Right. I can't believe the thing's not. How odd. Having something that crashes idle when you're trying to display a show error is somewhat ironic. I don't know what's going on. Forget it. We don't need no sneaking error messages. All right, and so now I'm going to create something that I want the user to be able to interact with. Well, let's put a message on the screen first. So we're going to use what's known as a label. When you have a graphical user interface, you'll have, text that's being shown, and then you have places where you can type your data in, and you'll have buttons you can click. And if you feel like getting more arcane and have checkboxes or, radio selector buttons or, sliders or things like that, it supports those as well. So to create a label, something that we're going to display on the screen, I'm just going to call it L1 because I'm not creative. So L1 is equal to label. And then here we're going to say, what window are you attached to? I'm attached to the window because you can draw multiple windows on the same screen. And what text do you want to put into it? Like that. That's the text that's going to be displayed. And L2 is equal to label, same window, username and password. Now for these to actually show up on the screen, we need to call .pack on them. I can't really explain what that does except to say that as soon as you call .pack, it places it into the window and makes it visible. If I comment these two lines out, they're not going to be visible. And so here's our interface. Now, .pack is one of the interests as a graphical user manager for just keeping the things on the screen, compresses it down to its absolute minimum size. And you can try to work around that, but I'm not going to put any of the workarounds in that. And so our user interface is going to be as small as possible whenever we call .pack. Kind of compresses everything. It packs it into the most minimal space possible. One thing you can do is if you have no further use for interacting with that control in the future, and that's true for a lot of controls, is you could call .pack right as you're creating it, and you don't even need to save the result in a variable. I'm going to wind up deleting as I expect, but oh, come on, don't. There. You hear me if you get frustrated because I wish I could disable the touchpad when a mouse is plugged in. Don't know if my shirt is triggering it or what. All right, and so anyways, there we go. So this is going to create another object, assign it to that window that we've created, and then call .pack on it right away. Same for that one. So we're going to get 2 more fields. Or it's going to blow up. What have I done here? String has no attribute items. Huh? What if I had done the classic and broken it up? Is that going to work? Excuse me for trying something different. All right, did I accidentally edit something that? Oh, look what I forgot to put. Text equals. So yes, that would have worked, right? Text equals. And then if I felt like it, since if I knew that I was never going to interact with it again, I could just call .pack as I was creating it and not even pop it up on the screen. I mean, not even store it in a variable. Okay, so, I'll probably delete that as well. And I'm probably going to go ahead and keep with the convention of creating it and then packing it on the next line. And the reason I'm going to do that is because although you use labels and buttons and entry fields, you create them with the same controls. If you're not using .pack to manage them, then you're not going to need to call .pack. And I don't want people just copying and pasting code where everything that is created instantly invokes .pack because it's not compatible with some of the other methods for placement. Okay, so what do I really want it to look like? When I run it, I want to have a username followed by an entry field right here for typing in, and then a password and an entry field. Right now, everything we add is getting stacked on each other. So we need the ability to send things to the left and to the right. So we need a variable to contain our username. And so when we're using a Tkinter interface, it's not good enough just for us to have our good old classic strings and ints and floats. There are widgets that provide functionality for transferring data to and from the controls, and those look like this. Well, you know what? I guess I don't have to do it that way to begin with, but it's so much easier to do it that I feel like we probably should. Sorry, just a moment. So what you do is you create your string variable, and we're going to need two of them, right? One for username and one for password. Let's get these out of the way because we're going to need to pack these things in a deliberate order. The top line needed to be the name and then a place for entering our data. So I'm just going to call this one S username for the string variable, capital S, capital V. And then we're going to create, well, firstly, let's do it like this, and then we'll switch it over to being an entry field. So let's set that value. We're going to actually wind up deleting this because we don't actually want it to have any default text. And it would help if I didn't have that. And then we need to create something. And in this case, it's just going to be a label, and then I'll fix it. Do something a little bit more interesting, where we say the window is still that, but we're not going to assign text to it. Instead, we're going to say that our text variable that we pull our data from is s_username. And now when I pack these, I'm going to pack I shouldn't use L2 because we have L2 coming down right there. And just call it L username for label username. And again, I'm going to replace that with an actual input field in a minute. Right? So, oh, these packs down here are the ones that are, I said I was going to break these up into separate functions, and I haven't. Just delete all that. Okay, so when I pack these things on the screen, I can pack them and say which side I want them to be on. L1.pack side equals left, because the descriptive text needs to be on the left. And I don't know why I capitalized that and lowercase this one. And then L2.pack, and we're going to make that thing go in this. Well, there is no L2, but there's a username. Side equals right. And then down here, if I just pack this one, L2.pack, it's going to be underneath both of those. I think. It occurs to me that the way that I demonstrated JSON was to have everything in its own frame. Yeah, that doesn't seem to be showing anything. So yeah, if we create, when we're doing the in this fashion, if we create a new frame, which I forgot to do, I cannot believe that. I need to bring my example back up and make sure that I'm not wandering off the map like I just did. Alrighty, I should delete all this, but I'm not going to. As soon as you create your window, I should have created a frame. Frame is equal to frame with a capital F, and I'm attaching that frame to that specific window. And then each time I create an object, I should be attaching it to that frame. So I need to call pack on the frame to tell it to get ready to start accepting things. And then I create the label. And I could pack it immediately. There's nothing wrong with just saying, okay, yo, I want you to do yourself as soon as possible. And then we create the next label and we pack it. So L username dot pack and send it to the right. And then I'd be ready for the next line of text, right? The next line on the control. So frame 2 equals frame based on which window when. And then when we create this next one, we send it to frame 2 and we pack that, get it to show up. All right, so I'm not seeing my password field for some reason, but I am seeing username and hello. Jason, this works so much better when you and I were at it on Friday. I should just upload that video instead. Why is it not showing our second label? Because I forgot to pack the frame. Everything you create, you have to pack. Right. There we go. All right, so we're getting there, right? Except we want this one to be editable. We want this text to be on the left, and we want another editable field on the right.
Yeah, for some reason, win.main loop is not wanting to be recognized for me this time around.
Oh, really? Yeah, oh, yeah, that's right. And if you're using PyCharm, and what we discovered is that you have to call main loop in order to get the window to work. And you're telling me that is not.
Yes, for oh, just a second. Let me see if it was just a simple indentation error. Oh yeah, never mind. I just didn't have it indented.
Okay, good. All righty. So I don't want to just merely display this string hello. I actually want them to be able to edit it. So instead of making a label, I need to make an entry field. Because there's nothing wrong with leaving that there, just as an example that you can attach a string to a label. But here's what I'm really going to do. And I'm going to call it the real creative name of E1. I'm just going to create an entry field called E1. So E1, and I capitalize everything else, why not? E1 is equal to entry. And then when I say entry, I need to set the text variable. Text variable equals s underscore username. And then I can pack it. Send it to the right side, whereas the label is on the left. Right, and so then we can type in our password there. And I totally spaced. Why did I comment out the creation of the thing that says, okay, username is there. That's good. I packed it, right? Sent it to the left. And then I created an entry field and I sent it to the right, but it didn't show up on the right. Instead, it showed up to the right of the next frame. Well, when we were creating these last time, were we specifying widths for them? Is that what's going on here? Well, didn't I just see two pieces of things sitting there pretty as a picture right next to each other? They really are right.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, my mic was muted, but yeah. And we had a width set for some buttons as well.
But it wasn't that size. All right.
No, it was like 30 or something. Actually, I have it pulled up. It's what was it? Oh, yeah, we had a width of 20. It was pretty.
So when I'm calling .pack here, I didn't even specify the side, and it went to the right. Now it's working. But if I make it an entry, and now it worked, whereas down here it wasn't. Well, that's the key, is to do just everything absolutely one at a time. All right, but I want to make it an editable variable. So create my username password above this. One step at a time. I'm going to run it even before I make any other changes. All right. And now I'm going to, instead of saying text is equal to whatever, I'm going to set this equal to that variable. Text var equals the S username variable. Well, it's working, and it didn't work down here. Okay. So L2 is a stupid name for it because it's no longer a label. What is it? It's an input field. So I'm going to call it E1, E1. I'm going to delete this stuff because it was not working correctly. This example should have taken half the time that it has. See, now it's working great. I guess I won't complain. So what are we going to do? We're going to add another frame underneath it with the password text and then the password field. Now, hello should be something, you know, a little bit more interesting, or just a blank, right? Okay, so that was one frame. Next frame. Frame 2 equals frame attached to that wind. I could just copy and paste a lot of this stuff, right? Because instead of saying username, this one's going to say password. And then we're going to need to create a string variable to hold our password. Password equals string var, parentheses and parentheses. Set that password to empty, or set password dot set empty string. And then create an entry to hold that. E2 is equal to entry based on that frame, and set his text var equal to our new text field.
Do we need to pack that frame first?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. Thank you. And then we should be able to pack him onto the right. And even though I created frame 2, I was sticking everything on frame. So that obviously didn't work. Once we create frame 2, that's where I want to start putting these things. So that should have been attached to frame 2. And that should have been attached to frame 2. And then frame 3 is just going to be our button, right? So these text fields are slightly different widths because the text is slightly different widths. So when we create our label, we could specify a width. See if that makes it look pretty. A little bit too much. Yeah, that's looking good. And now for one more frame to contain our button so that we can click OK. Oh, and not that I'm going to keep it like this, but what happens if you, as you're adding frames to the window, if you pack them to the left and to the right, you can do that. I'm going to undo that. You saw what happened, right? I sent this frame to the right and this frame to the left. And so now, you know, I've divvied it up left and right, and you can do that. I'm going to undo those changes. All right, now for the button. B1 is equal to button. Whoops, forgot to create a frame for it. Frame 3 equals new frame. B1 is equal to button, attach it to frame 3. He needs to have some kind of text on him. Text equals, or we could create a text variable for him, a string variable, but there's no reason for that because the text on our button isn't going to change. And then we need to specify a command that the button will call when it is clicked. So pack the frame, pack the button. There is no function called check password, so this won't compile. So just very temporarily, I'm going to create one. Well, main loop's going to have to be under it. There we go. And all this is going to do is print the word click. As soon as we call click the button, it's going to invoke this function. Note that we did not put the parentheses here. That's because we are specifying a function to pass in. We're not calling the function at this point. And if we put the parentheses there, it would call it. We're waiting for the user interface to call that function when that button is clicked. So when we pass in a password pointer there, excuse me, a function pointer there, we need to make sure that we don't put the parentheses to actually invoke it. Sorry, I slipped into Java there. There's no new keyword in this language. Just frame is equal to frame. When I created the frame, I forgot to specify what window it attaches to. Sorry, it's not the abbreviation CMD, it's the entire word command. And there's our login button, right? Seems to be generating a lot of error text when I'm clicking on it. No, it's just generating a word click, which is to be expected. What if we wanted a login button and a cancel button, right? We could create two buttons and pack one and send one to the left and one to the right. Or we could make the text login. We could specify a width here, make it a little bit wider so that it's prettier on the screen. Like that. We want to get really fancy. We could specify a foreground and a background color for it. So the foreground, I'm going to put a backslash here just to indicate that we're continuing our command on the next line. The foreground is equal to white, and the background to our button is black. I didn't do it. Maybe you can't assign a background color to a window. I mean, to a button. That's news to me. Anyways, we can make the foreground of that red. Can't do that at all, really? Buttons don't want background colors. All right. However, our input field, like when we created this, we could have said foreground is equal to, you know, I'm just going to prove the point that I can because I want to be able to, right? Now that's going to look stupid and I'm not going to really want to stick with it, but you know, yellow text on a black background for the password field. Right? Just didn't work on a button. There's got to be a way to change the background color of buttons as well. Did I not have that exact same text? What if I make the background of it red? I'm not going to mess with that. I don't know why the button's not changing when. So anyways, kind of silly to make it look like that, but I guess if I applied it to at least both entry fields, then I could do that way. Why not just make it like blue text on a gray background or a silver background? If you want a list of the colors you can use, then Tkinter colors. So like ghost white, white smoke, snow. Maybe I'll use ghost white or white smoke as my background color for the text fields. And I'm going to do the same for the other entry field. That was for the password, and now for the username. Right, now you can tell the difference, right? Slightly lighter color. We could have created a background color for the frame itself as we created it, or for the window itself as we created it. All right, and so when login is clicked, it just prints a message. What should we do? We should check it to some certain values. Now I'm going to try the message box again because I want to be able to display an error if it fails or succeeds, and I don't want it to hang I don't want it to hang Python So I'm going to give it another shot. Message, not text. Okay. Or not. Come on. Oh. It doesn't like positional arguments, or am I just choosing the wrong ones? Okay, fine. No positional arguments. Just make it say click and log in. Right. And so it's been clicked and we could put our message there. How do we do it? Well, we need to check our data, right? So what are we going to do? Well, this is going to be silly, but we're just going to pull the text out that we want to compare it against. T1 is equal to S underscore username dot get the text out of that string. T2 is equal to S underscore password dot get. Make sure those are correct. And if T1 equals Joe, that's our password. And T2 equals, and what is Joe's password? It's the word silly.
Mine's actually working. My button background is in fact black with a red color.
Okay, I don't know if that's a Mac Python glitch or what, because I was sure it did work. Otherwise, I wouldn't have hung out, trying to bang on it to get it.
Yeah, it's working.
That's weird. Thank you for telling me that. Now some shred of sanity has been preserved. Okay,
Yeah,
so if these things are correct, then we pop up a message box saying that it is correct, right? So message box dot show info. So here we go, right? Title is equal to none. Message is equal to none. Anyways. So this is login, comma, and our message is going to be incorrect. And wait, this is successful, right? Else, we're going to display a warning. Valid username or password. I guess I'm not surprised by that. This is what I get for trying to make things in their own functions. You see this username here? This variable was created inside of one function, and I'm trying to access it inside another function. So they need to be defined outside of the function. So it is way too bad that I set it up this way. These would need to be global variables. What I should have done is I should have put all this into a class. I think what I'm going to do instead is I'm just going to comment these out and say these should have been made global variables. I mean, I guess it's not that hard to do that. Just irks me that I forgot that they weren't going to be available. So where do we create our two strings? We did s username is equal to string var, and we did s password equals string var. So we're going to do those above the function and make them global variables so that they're available to both functions. So the username string var, the password string var. There, now they're available between both functions because they're defined outside both of main and the password. Going from bad to worse. Probably because I don't have import. No, they're right there. Would work if they were here. I mean, no, they're not global. This is not going to make it work, but I'm confused as to why it stopped working. Are you that positionally dependent that you can't create those fields until you've created a windows and a frame? If you don't refer to those, then all right, well, what if you don't have access to those strings? And this is really stupid for me not to have access to the strings, but what if you didn't have access to those strings? You could actually query the entry field itself and ask for its text. So just .get should be able to get the text out of it rather than rely upon the string control. So again, it's not going to know what that. I have goofed on this. Tell you what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I'm going to paste it as actually part of this function so that it's available to it. And this is poor programming. And the reason I'm running into all these troubles is that I should have defined this as a class, and that was going to be my next example, so that this data would be available to all the functions that were part of the class. Anyways, before I create my button, I have to create the function that it can call. Ah, that makes sense. It was tabbed over. So the only stuff that's part of this particular function is the stuff that's tabbed and indented underneath it. All right. So we're back to a working point. So my examples that I had in front of me, and I forgot that I would need to worry about this, did not put it into a function called main. And if I had neglected to do that, then I thought that everything was going to be hunky-dory. I forgot that we would need to have these variables created and be able to be shared between functions. When I realized that, what I did is I created the function actually as part of the other function. And you're allowed to do that. It looks stupid, right? Define A, and then inside A, you define B. But you can. That totally works. It totally works. And the only reason I did that is so that this function could have access to these variables. I could make it back to the way, yeah, Yeah, s1 username.get, s_password.get. That's fine. All right, so let's do another example. Instead of frame, let's make a new one called main2. So instead, I'm going to make my function called main2. Need to create a new window. Need to create a frame. We're going to create a counter variable, and so instead of it being a string var, it's going to be an int var. So counter is equal to int var. Don't know why I put that there. We're going to initialize. I haven't packed frame yet. Excuse me. We're going to set int var initial value to 0. So counter.set 0. We're going to create a label on the screen that contains that value.
The F needs to be capitalized for f.pack.
Yes. Thank you. All right. And then so the label has its text var, even though it's not really text, it's an integer. They just wanted to use the same name for it, I guess, is equal to the counter. And we're going to pack that to the left. Now we're going to create a button. Attach it to our frame. And when I created my label, I should have attached it to the frame, and I forgot to. And so his text is going to say, plus, because we're adding one to it. And the command that he calls is going to be called plus. Now he doesn't have a command yet, so let's define one. And what does this do? It's just going to take the number out. Tell you what, let's run it and make sure that it even displays this before we go too nuts, because if I had 20 lines of code and then can't figure out which one's failing. All right, it's not displaying my button, probably because I forgot to call button dot. No, just because I commented out the creation of the button. So anyways, so we're going to uncomment this out, make it b1.pack. And what is plus going to do? It's going to take the text out of our counter, the number out of the counter, and then it's going to add one to it, and it's going to set the text back into the counter. So I is equal to counter.get, I plus equals 1, and then counter.set I. So you see what we did. We just grabbed that text, and then we put it back in. So when I click plus, you can see what it's doing. Well, nice of me to have zoomed it in. I'm going to set some width variables so that it's not all so tiny. Width of our labels, that the width of our button, whoopsie. I wanted to send our button equal to the right, I said, and then the width of that button is also going to be 10. There, like that, right? All right, let's define this as more of a class. The next example, Python quit. You sure are being squirrely today. Oh, but that reminds me, the problem I was having, well, we need to call a win loop anyways, win.main loop. Remember when the message box was crashing? It stopped at a certain point. When I change this back to main, and I type in the password, right, that's not crashing it. And it was before. So bizarre. And I bet it wouldn't have been crashing for you at all. I love my Mac, and all of a sudden I'm going to blame all the problems on it being a Mac. And Python doesn't work right on a Mac. No, I've never seen a case where it doesn't, but that's pretty inexplicable. The backgrounds of the buttons not being colored, and then the way the message boxes were hanging. So anyways, changing this back to main 2. I think we're done with that example though, unless I wanted to add more text fields, right? And I don't really see a need. So, you could actually create a calculator, right? With 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, multiply, divide, and things like that, if you so chose. All right, now I want to do a grid example rather than the pack example. Let me find my notes on that.
Could you go back to the last few lines of code? I was done. Yeah, okay.
Sorry about that.
Oh, no problem. I just didn't see what we're doing.
Oh, well, while we're at it, why don't we demonstrate a checkbox? So let's make another frame. We need a Boolean variable to control the checkbox. Check equals Boolean var. And we're going to set it equal to true. And I'm actually wishing that all of this was above the button. So I'm going to cut that and put it up here. We need to set it equal to true just because I want it to display. Now we need to assign it to a checkbox widget. So since I've already used the word check here, I was just calling everything single letter names, and that's really annoying. Check for adding equals check button. That's supposed to be an equal. We need to attach it to our frame. And then we are going to set its text equal to positive, like it's adding a positive or negative. And the variable we are assigning it to, I'm not sure why it's not text var, but in my example it says variable. I wonder if we could have changed them all like that. Let's find out. And the variable that this control is hooked up to is called check. That was supposed to be an equal sign. Let's pack that one. Now really, I kind of wish that this was part of frame 1. So I'm going to cut this line, all of these lines actually, and make them part of frame 1. So that was just an F rather than F2. Let's pack this and send it to the right. So the checkbox.pack goes to the right. And the button doesn't need a site at all now because it's on its own line, right? The button was supposed to go on its own line. It hasn't. What did I do wrong? Oh, because I sent the button on the other frame, not on its own line. So I need to change its frame. I forgot to pack that button frame, didn't I? All right. And we could read the value of this positive, negative variable, right? And just add or subtract based on that result. So let's make our little counter thing check to see whether we're going to add or subtract from it. So if check.get is equal to true, then we add one to it, I plus equals 1, else colon, we subtract from it, I minus equals 1. Like that. So let's take a stab, and I almost feel like creating a brand new file for this rather than just adding it onto this, onto turning our password dialog. No, I really wanted to do a grid rather than a class-based one. Let me keep getting distracted from finding my grid examples. All right, so let's make a main 3. I mean, I guess I could be documenting these, right? Shows a dialog with an add button, a checkbox, and a label that displays a number that counts up or down. That's what that one did. Time for main 3. We know the drill. We need to create our window, capital T, lowercase k. And instead of creating a frame, we're going to start adding things directly to the window, but we're going to specify their grid row number, row 1, row 2, row 3. And so L1 equals label, attach it to that window. And the text that it's supposed to be displaying is first name, and as we create it, we're going to specify that we want it to go on the top row. Row is equal to 0. L2 is equal to label when text equals, I don't know why I did that, last name dot grid, and tell him to go on the row is equal to 1. As we created the window, we could have set its geometry. So as you create it, you can call dot geometry, and then you put in a number for the width and a number for the height. Now, this example is really cryptic, but we're replacing these with numbers that mean the width and the height. So let's make a 100 by 100 window, right? So win.geometry just inside quotes. It's kind of weird. It's one of the stranger looking things. Let's like that. So now we're not using pack to arrange things, so we don't have to call pack after every single thing we create. Now let's create some entry fields. So E1 is equal to an entry that we're going to attach to that window. E2 is equal to an entry that we're going to attach to that window. And E1, we're going to position. I kind of wish I hadn't done it like that. That kind of makes it look makes sense, really. But I don't want to cross my streams here. So grid row is equal to 0. Column is equal to 1 because these guys are in the first column, right? And if you leave it off, it defaults the column being 0, but now I'm going to call them out specifically. That almost sounded like a pun. Here we go. Window needs to be a little bit wider. I forget which one's the width and which one's the depth, so we just try it experimentally. It's looking a little bit better. All right, that's cool. I'm going to leave that one 100. I'm going to put in some kind of button now that just does something with those two pieces of information. Now, my other examples, I showed a string variable being attached to them. This time, I'm just going to read directly from the field. So let's make one more button, but it's going to be a button that is as wide as both of those fields. It's going to span 2 columns. So he's attached to that window. His text is show me, and the command is clicked or something like that. Some command name, doesn't matter what. And we need to set his grid. Now you can call the set grid on this as you create it, or you can do it after you create it. And so this is going to be row 2, but his call span is going to be 2. He's going to span 2 columns. So row is equal to 2, column is equal to 0, column span is equal to 2. Let's give him a function to call. It's just going to take the text out of the first name and out of the last name and then message box them together, right? So string is equal to e1.get message box dot show error s. Zero zero? How long does it say 00? I guess I was planning on changing it to 70 or 60 and then backed away from that change. 100 by 100. No, I had increased its width. All right, anyways. None type has no attribute get. Maybe I should have assigned a text variable to it. Tkinter entry get text.
So is the dot grid replacing the dot pack?
Exactly, exactly. Well, that didn't scare it out very fast. Okay, .inset lets you add text to an entry field. I don't want to add text to the entry field. I want to get the text from it. This is taking way longer than it should have. Okay, fine. I'll create two text variables. T1 is equal to string var. T2 is equal to string var. As we create our entries, text var is equal to T1. Text var equals T2. And then when we're ready to get the text out of it, T1.get. Didn't actually seem to get the text out of it. Finally, remember to change the .geometry call. Oh, it's going up there. All right. So message box. I'm not going to put any title on it. I'm just going to display the message itself. Right. So I like the grid actually better than .pack. That's kind of just works with my brain, right? You know, setting X positions and Y positions. And I'm wondering if in the future I'll get rid of doing .pack entirely and just use a grid, because although we've only done one example like that. Now I'd like to go ahead and, if you don't mind us scrolling off this page, well, I mean, I guess we could do it right here. Yeah, so let's define a class that's got our password dialog in it, but let's use the grid just because. So this is going to be the login dialog. And we have to use the word class there. I always do that, type def and then flip over and then type class. Okay, and so what is the init function going to do? It needs to create the window. So self.win is equal to tk. Let's set our size, self.win.geometry. 200 by 200. We'll fine tune it later, right? Now we need some text variables. T1 is equal to string var. T2 is equal to string var. I should probably make these be self variables so that we can refer to them inside another method inside the button handler. Labels don't need to be referred to in any other functions. In this particular case, I'm not going to even bother making it a self variable. And this one's going to be a label that is attached to self.when, and it says username. We're going to set it to the first row, the first column. L2 equals label, self.when, password. This label goes on the second row in the first column. Now we need to create two entry fields that are going to use these strings. So E1 is equal to entry, text var equals s, self.t1, E2 equals entry. I'm going too far. I should be testing it incrementally right. Text var equals, and I forgot to call the grid on that one, self.t2. And so I could call E1 and E2.grid right here, or I could just do it right there, right? I mean, I could do this, E1.grid, and say I want you to show up on the first row, but in the second column. And E2.grid goes on the second row in the second column. And instead of main 3, let's have a main 4. So define main 4. All we're going to do is create our login dialog, right? DLG equals login dialog. It'll be a miracle if this works. I mean, the concepts are fine, but since I wasn't doing it incrementally, I'm not surprised that it blew up. Text equals username, text equals password. Our password text is gone. Oh, why did I stick that? Since this is vertically arranged, I want both of those words to be in the leftmost column and the entry fields to be in the rightmost. Okay, we're getting there. It needs to be a little bit wider and a lot shorter. So now, how about making a login button that is right here, right? But it's going to take up 2 rows. So I think we can use row span in order to do that. But we're going to need a function for it to call. Define clicked. Right now it's just going to print click, right? I just want a function for it to call. So B1 is equal to button, attach it to our self.when. Text is equal to login. Dot grid. Row equals 0. Column equals 2. Row span equals 2. Span 2 columns. And I forgot to mention the command. I think I'm going to split this up into 2 calls. That's getting pretty big there. But when he is clicked, his command is to call the clicked method. Probably self.clicked. Now let's add him to our grid. b1.grid, row equals 0, column equals 2, row span equals 2. Well, it didn't do the row span of 2. It didn't size it the way I wanted it to. I'm sure that it could be done. Instead, I'm just going to put it underneath it. Well, otherwise, I'm going to have to get, let's give it a shot. Height equals 70. That should not have been there. Let's try that. Well, okay, when I said 70, it created the world's tallest button. 70 watts, I guess, becomes a question. $30. He definitely needs to be wider. I'll shrink it down as appropriate. Getting it right? Let me guess, if I make it 2, it's going to span 2 of them perfectly. No, 3 looks okay. All right. And then we can do the same business of the function checking, pulling that data out of these text fields, right? And how do we make this dialog close when it has been clicked? I forgot to worry about that on our last password dialog. Anyway, so if e1.get is equal to bugs, is equal to bugs, and e2.get, his password, of course, is bunny, then message box.show info. Correct. Else message box.show info. Incorrect. And as we learned last time, we have to put the title first. E1 is not defined. That's because it's self.e1. Needs to be. But I wanted the string variables. So if self.t1.get is equal to bugs, right? Because I'm referring to these strings. And self.t2.get. TW, let me guess. There. Alrighty. Normally password dialogs fill in with circles rather than text as you type them. Let me remind myself if Tkinter supports that. Show equals asterisk. Let's give that a shot. So when we create our second field, as we type, we want it to show asterisks. Neat. Well, let me get rid of that. All right, anyways, I'm going to run it again. There we go, right? And so my name is Bugs. My password is Bunny. Nope, that's incorrect. How do we close Tkinter window once I get the correct one? Dot destroy. All right, let's give it a shot. If it is successful, we're going to close the window. So self.win.destroy. Now, really, when you type in a password, you don't usually want to see a message for success. You just want it to go on and do what it was supposed to do, right? What did I type wrong? Oh, anybody see the error here? What is wrong with that? Forgot to add my parentheses. Okay. You would think that would be an error. Bugs, Bunny, login, correct, and then it disappears. What if we create multiple dialogues? Jason, are you doing this example and did it work for you with when loop called or when.main loop not called?
Let me go ahead and run it.
But anyways, you saw what happened. I created 3 windows. Now I have 3 windows going on at the same time.
Let me see. I'm just getting the one window to pop up.
All right. Well, anyways, that's useless frippery. But what I'm wondering is if I needed to do this for it to work reliably for you, but it did pop up the window for you even before you did that.
Because it's popping up with the first part when we first defined main 3 all the way up to define click.
Okay.
Showing up that stuff, but when we start the class dialog, maybe
Right.
I need another main loop in there.
Yeah, I just added one of that.
Let's see if that works. Let's see if that. Okay. Yeah, the second part's just not wanting to come up. The part
Okay.
where the bugs and bunny.
All right, when I had created several dialogues in a row, it started behaving rather off. And what I'm thinking is that I should have made absolutely every one of these a self variable so that they would be contained only in one method, excuse me, one object. So I probably should have made the label, even though I thought that I could just create it and add it to the grid there and that would be enough. I think I need to do this. And then, well, let me make sure that works. Yeah. Line 123. All right, one more change I'm going to make just for fun is to make it so that this thing has a close method, and that is what calls self.win.destroy.
I just noticed my problem. Why mine's not running is because I don't have define main for. I'm not actually calling the class we just built.
Okay. All right.
That's the problem.
All right. So what I did is I moved down the call to destroy into its own method so that we could call it from any of these functions that we wanted to, not just from the clicked method, if that was what we chose to do. And if I've got this set up correctly, I should be able to make two login dialogues on the screen at the same time and have them both work independently of each other since they are classes, since they are objects. So we got one. Well, where'd the other one go? Working a minute ago. I saw several dialogues pop up. Oh, it's hanging at when loop. It's hanging here, not letting anything proceed. So I'd rather not call that if I don't have to. All right, see the name, the entry field is still being tied to this one and not this one. It's not popping up the multiple dialogues correctly. And I guess I'm not going to struggle with it. Yep, yes, absolutely correct. I'm not going to struggle with it. All right, so anyways, if you need to call main loop on it, you could add a method, that would call main loop, or you could just tag it on there if it's necessary for you. It seems to work fine on idle, but Jason's using PyCharm and it seemed pickier about whether it had an invocation of main loop or not in it. And so if we wanted to do that, then we could just tack it on there, or we could create another method and then call main loop from down here. Nothing wrong with just doing it here, I believe. All right, so there is one other way of doing this. Well, you've already given me pack and you've already given me grid. Well, I hope I've sold you on grid. And I hope that having done several examples on pack, you understand that you can do that as well. I just think grids are easier to understand than frames. You can use frames and pack, so you can use grid. And then there's another one called dot place. Tkinter place method. So here's their example. I am a label. Click me. GFG. So how does that work? You create, here they're using master rather than win. You create your TK window. You set the geometry for it. You create your button and then you place it on the screen with a dot place command. And I don't really know what rel x means, but I'm sure we can figure it out. And so then anchor is equal to northeast. I don't use dot place, so I haven't taken much time in doing it, but notice that you can get very positionally specific on it. This, where's our sample now? This button down here is way below the other ones. This label is to the upper left. This click me is to the upper right. Let's find where click me is created. It says anchor northeast to get it into the upper right for the button, excuse me, for the click, yeah, for the click me button, went to the northeast. How about I'm a label? It was anchored to the northwest. And then this text was supposedly anchored to the center. And you can fine tune its placement, I am sure, by using these X and these Y coordinates. Just going to say you can. I guess I'll add a reference to this document saying, let's go up here and add some notes. 3 ways of managing your widgets on your window. 1, using frame and dot pack. We've done several examples of those. Skipping frame and using dot grid. And then 3, using dot place. There's a URL for it. All righty. So what I want us to do for this as a homework assignment, and I don't want to make it too traumatic because I want people to be working on their projects. And by the way, at least one person has gotten their project done. I appreciate that. That's pretty awesome. They're going to go and do a second one, of course, since they've completed the first one so speedily. So anyways, homework. I want you to lay out a dialog that looks like this. Should draw it in a drawing program. Anyways, it's going to have a label that shows a number. You know what? I need to think this one through more carefully, and so I'm not just going to make it up on the spot because I want it to actually be somewhat useful. But it's going to be a car interface to where you can step on an accelerator and it raises the number but lowers the gas. And then when you step on the brake, it lowers the number. And then once the gas gets 0, then it pops up a message saying out of gas. I mean, I guess I could write that up now, but yeah, I'll go ahead and write that up. I'll add that here. We're almost at the point where we need to end, but okay. So one button is the gas pedal. That adds 1 to the speed, but subtracts 1. The gas, and then the brake pedal. That reduces 1 from the speed. Gas should start at 10 and speed should start at 0. The gas pedal is clicked, but gas is equal to 0. Use message box to tell them they are out of gas. I think that's clear enough. And you can make it look as pretty as you want, or as ugly as you want. Put the, yeah. I'll give you enough freedom to decide how to do that. Oh, how about putting a picture on the screen? Let's see if we can do that in 2 minutes, because I think we can. Apparently, there's a control called photo image, and you specify a file. Let's see if we can get that to work. One more example. If y'all don't need to run, I guess if you do, you can come back and watch the very end of the video in a minute. So one more window, right? That's not, how you doing? Geometry. So image is equal to photo image, and we need to give it a file name. Picture dot whatever. Well, I need to go and find a picture. I need to know where I'm saving these things to. They're into my documents folder. All righty. So just go and find me a picture of a puppy. You'll do. Save image as, he's a JPEG. All righty. So in the same directory as my documents, I need to put the image, puppy.jpg. Needs to be in the same folder as my py file is. Open it, make sure it views, huh? All right. So then in my code, I can load up puppy.jpg. And then I'm going to make a label to display the image in. So label equals label with being set to our window, and the image is set to that IMG there. And I guess we'll grid it and set it for 0, row equals 0, column equals 0. And then win.main loop. And as you're looking at these, you'll see examples that call the window variable master, and you'll see other examples that call them root. I'm happy calling them win. All right, so let's see if that actually puts a picture on the screen. I can't say that it did. Choose the pack interface instead. If we're going to pack it, then this label needs to be attached to that frame. Not working. I'm not going to spend my time on it. I thought it'd be cool to show you. I haven't done it in the past, so.
Puppy picture have to be in the same directory as Python?
Yes, it does. No, it needs to be in the same directory as my script.
Oh, yeah, okay.
That's what I thought, and it does not seem to be working. I wonder if URLs work. That'd be crazy. I don't see how that could possibly work. Well, that's too bad. Well, there seems to be another library called Image TK. There's the Python imaging library. I'm willing to give this a shot, but then I'm going to stop the exploration and we can get back to it on Thursday if this doesn't work. So let's go ahead and try that. From PIL import image TK. When we're going to create our image, we're going to say image is equal to image open, image.open, puppy.jpg. And then the photo is equal to image tk dot photo image parentheses that image. And then when we create it, the label, we do that. Excuse me. Yeah, all righty, forget it. I'm gonna have to do some research. Although Python imaging library is probably something you could install, that you could download. Yeah, but I'm not gonna spend the time fixing it. I'll worry about that and be able to demonstrate it to you on Thursday. So that was a big bucket of fail. Delete that, leave it back to that example. I don't know if I gave you enough examples to convince you that creating a class is a pretty cool thing to do. But in this particular case, since it didn't let us create multiple login windows, then it may not have been worth doing. On the other hand, by making our variables part of a class, then we didn't have to do that business where we did where we had to create the button right before and as part of the function, right? We didn't have to embed a function within a function to do that. All righty, I'm going to go ahead and make the Dropbox for us.